Hello, I'm Mark Siegrist, filling in for Dan Jones this week. Thanks for joining us. Post-election politics is becoming more interesting than the campaign itself. From sour grapes to fiscal cliffs and military affairs, we have it covered. What's the downside to recreational pot? And what do Rick Horowitz and country artist Crystal Gayle have in common? The answer is coming up. But first, let's meet members of Milwaukee's premier weekly roundtable. Dan told me to talk you up before he left. Longtime newspaper columnist Joe McNally is with us. Gerard Randall is an education consultant and job creation expert. And of course, Denise Callaway is a community affairs and public relations professional. Rick Horowitz is loosening up his pipes and will be along just a bit later in our program. The election is over, but the partisan bickering in D.C. and across the country is still in full swing. As the new year approaches, lines are being drawn over how to avoid the so-called fiscal cliff, implementation of Obamacare, even why the president won. Mitt Romney upset a few fellow Republican leaders this week when he repeated his charge of Obama benevolence. That's not to mention Congress's other hot-button issues like the attack in Benghazi and the fall of a four-star general. Ms. McNally, the Potomac right now waters are just a little bit rough, huh? It's kind of messy out there.
Well, I don't know why, because I'm actually very happy, so I can't imagine all the turmoil. It always is kind of amazing to me after an election, particularly this election, which was predicted to be very close. Although if you read the right predictors, the so-called momentum in the last week was really always going towards Obama, not towards Romney. But every time the election is over, first of all, just like when the Bushes got out of sight, boy, the Republicans couldn't wait to be rid of Romney. The Republican governors just this week were already denouncing what he was saying and trying to distance themselves from him. But also all the pundocracy, so-called, comes out and is really worried about the Republican Party and you know, are they gonna go into extinction? You know, can they possibly change because they got beat so bad and by all these demographic groups that they've actually, you know, actively driven away from their party? They're going to be around and they're going to be bothering us for a good long time. And you know, there are plenty of candidates on their side that are just champing at the bit to, you know, have another crack at it in 4 years. I don't worry so much about them. I hope that they've changed to the extent that they've abandoned this theory that they should just oppose everything Obama does and that somehow is going to make them look good. Because I think that's one of the reasons they got beat, was they were seen as obstructionists. They were seen as people who weren't doing anything to improve the economy. So they could say when Obama ran for re-election, look, the economy isn't any better. Well, part of it was because they were voting against job creation and all kinds of things to try to make things better. And I think that was simply un-American, and it just didn't sit well with the American people.
Denise, of all the issues on the plate right now, which one is the most pressing?
Well, without a doubt, the fiscal cliff. I think it really is. Not because we're actually going to fall off a cliff all the way to the bottom. It's something when we take a look at all of the different pieces really that are in place to cause that economic potential catastrophe that we're facing. They're all not going to hit us at once. But it is where people begin to feel, and just as importantly, where the stock market feels, if we go off the cliff, the country is headed. That, to me, is really the key thing. And it is a dangerous situation for us as a country, I think, but it's even more dangerous for Republicans. Recent polling has shown that people will feel that if we go over the fiscal cliff, the folks to blame are the Republicans. This is something Republicans cannot afford at this point in time, between the gaffes that Governor Romney continues to make, where he's talking about Obama winning because the president gave people gifts. I mean, you know, it shows, it really clears up for anybody who was in doubt about whether or not this gentleman had the ability and the desire and the temperament to be president, that he did not have it. But Republicans are going to be in bad shape if, in fact, we're not able to reach a compromise. This fiscal cliff happens because people are going to blame Republicans for it. It continues to paint Republicans as being out of touch and unaware of the impact that their actions, or in many cases inactions, will have on middle-class people. And you know what? The next election's only 2 short years away, and the Republicans could find themselves losing the House potentially if people feel that the economy, which is so fragile right now, takes a downturn. They're going to blame Republicans for it.
When it comes to the fiscal cliff, in your opinion, Gerard, what's the key to compromise?
I don't think the Republicans are going to change their message. They may change how they deliver that message. They may change, in fact, some of the people that they put out front to deliver the message as well. So you'll see people like Paul Ryan have a higher profile in the party. I don't know that he would be the acknowledged new leader of the party. I think that still will rest with the Speaker. You've got close to 30 Republican governors. Many of them are talented in their own right and will want to lay some claim to leadership in the party, and they will begin to craft messages that they will deliver to the American people too. I think with regards to the fiscal cliff, Denise, you may be right. I think there will be a lot of Dems that will want to blame the Republicans for trying to hold the line on taxes, not wanting to engage the government in any more reckless spending. And as a result of that, compromise, well, it's in the eye of the beholder. And 2 years from now, there will probably be a reckoning. But I don't think that the Republicans will be punished as much as Democrats will hope.
Is Mitt Romney's opinion still relevant to the Republican Party?
I don't think it is very much. I think they could hardly wait to get rid of him, frankly.
Really?
You know, look how many candidates they went through, including some of the craziest ones on the face of the earth, before they even settled on him. You know, they tried every other candidate possible, and he was the last man standing because all the other, hopes of the Republican Party killed themselves by saying incredibly stupid things. I don't understand this idea that Paul Ryan is somehow the future of the party. I think the ideas he put out were so toxic, they were part of the reason that Mitt Romney got defeated. The idea of turning Medicare into a voucher system that won't keep up with the cost of medical care for seniors, so that more and more seniors would have to pay for their own care, that was a horrendous idea that he refused to back off from. That most Republicans in the House refused to back off from. They passed a horrible budget under Paul Ryan that the more you looked into it, the more you could find to drive people away from the Republican Party. Yeah, think of this controversy over the embassies. It's a phony controversy, but then you look at Ryan's budget, and the Republicans were the ones that cut funding to protect the embassies. If you constantly are driving this tax cut, all you can do is deliver less. And boy, people are finding out what that means for them personally.
I think that this weekend, Congress needs to get together and take a field trip. They need to go see the movie Lincoln, which really takes a look at a Republican president who mastered the art of working with his rivals and the art of compromise. I'm only half joking about that because I do think that is the kind of effort that we need. We need people to understand that the word compromise is not synonymous with defeat. The word compromise is something that we want our politicians to be able to do, because that means that you're doing it, something that's in the best interest of the American people, not what's in the best interest of your own party.
Which issue out there is the most distracting?
For right now, I think the fiscal cliff is
Well, what is distracting? What among the issues? Which issue is distracting us from the importance of focusing on fiscal
reaching some type of brokered deal? I think the aftermath of the election and the notion that we still have a very divided electorate and a very divided government.
And it depends on how much Republicans want to stick with this idea of never raise taxes on millionaires and billionaires. I mean, that's the message they were selling, and it didn't sell to the public, and it doesn't sell to anyone else who looks at the government and says, our tax system should at least be fair. Millionaires shouldn't pay less, a lower tax rate.
I don't think you won't get a disagreement from Republicans that the tax tax policy ought to be fixed. Now,
how about fair?
How it should be fixed, it is I think what will be left to debate, and whether or not that will yield increases across the board in taxes, particularly for those who are perceived to be very wealthy and can pay more taxes, I think that's where you're going to have some resistance.
Let's move on now to topic number 2. Last week, Washington and Colorado became the first 2 states to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. A number of states already allow for it for medical reasons, but this goes one big step further. It's still uncertain whether the feds will step in and enforce federal laws that make pot illegal. So where are we headed with this, Ms. Callaway?
Well, we're headed into interesting times. Someone said, I think it was the governor of Colorado who said, you know, don't stack up on, or stock up on Doritos and Cheetos yet. This thing is not over. I think it is a real question about whether or not the federal government is going to allow this to happen. There are all kinds of reasons why voters in Colorado and Washington State felt that this was something that they felt was important. We're talking about personal use. We're not talking about somebody who's going to have enough where they can be considered dealing marijuana. We're talking about the opportunity to have law enforcement spend more time on serious crimes than this small crime that some people feel is a victimless crime. But I think the real question is whether or not the federal government is going to let them make that decision. I think that it's not going to happen. I think the voters in those states have spoken, but the reality of it is what they want to do really is against federal law. To me, if we're talking about, you know, it's interesting to me that we're paying this much attention to the use of recreational marijuana when we have some real serious issues in this country about the recreational use that people have of other types of drugs, particularly alcohol. You know, if we take a look at what alcohol does in terms of destroying lives and destroying families, that is a real issue in this country. It's a real problem, and we do very, very little to address that. So to me, it's a little interesting that, you know, there's, as someone called it, a referendum, that there's been this much interest on those particular issues when, you know, quite frankly, I think we've got much more serious issues.
Well, the fairly recent Gallup poll, didn't it show something like 50% of Americans now support this? So is it? Well,
and look at the way the youth vote, the so-called youth vote in this electorate made a difference in all of politics. In who was elected from this state and who was elected president of the United States. It is amazing to me that we're sitting up here, people my age are sitting up here. I saw you
pointing to me, Joel, that's okay.
Are people sitting up here talking about this illegal drug, marijuana, and everyone here and everyone out there is familiar with it. And we now have presidents who have used it. We have Supreme Court justices who have used it sometime in their life, and they all live to tell the tale. And Denise is absolutely right. It's much less damaging than alcohol, actually. But we know what prohibition of alcohol did. It didn't do anything to stop the wreckage of alcohol in people's lives, and all it did was drive it underground. Politicians are so hypocritical on this issue that they're going to all have to be thrown out of office and replaced by the younger generation before it will change. It's amazing to me. I thought when I was in college and people started becoming aware of marijuana, that by the time my generation was the power generation, that mainly because everyone in law school smoked marijuana, surely the laws would be changed, right? But no, you know, politics is just too hypocritical for that, and it's going to take a little more time. But boy, you can see it being chipped away at with the votes in this election.
Do the feds really care what might happen in the states of Colorado and Washington?
I think that's unpredictable. Only because there have been so many of the federal policies in this administration that have bent towards the liberal side that who knows what they're more inclined to enforce or not enforce. The problem that I have with what happened is that for me, it's an extreme workforce issue. We have lots of young people who, when they go in for drug screenings, are bounced out of employment because they have tested positive for marijuana and in fact some other drugs that they consider recreational and in fact not harmful. At the end of it all, though, their reality and the reality of the modern workforce is that we lose a lot of people who could possibly be employable and maybe trained to be good workers if given the opportunity. It's a big problem in this state where we have, certainly in Central City, a lot of unemployment that is the result of people who fail to pass drug screens.
Mm-hmm. And that unemployment is not because of use of marijuana, it's because of the war on drugs and classifying marijuana and the use of marijuana as something that should prevent you from getting a job. And with it as widespread as it is, that's the wreckage of the war on drugs, treating everything as if it were the same. Everything that's now outlawed, when in fact we have now legalized probably a much more dangerous drug, alcohol.
The business community, though, would take a look at it and say, are we allowing more people to come in with a greater opportunity to be impaired, especially if you're looking at increasing the manufacturing base. Manufacturing workers will be needed, and their skills, their abilities will have to be such that they'll have to be far more alert on jobs. And I can understand it. I took a tour out at one of the manufacturing plants where they were doing welding.
Yes.
And the welders had to crawl into these tunnels and do spot welding in these very tight quarters. We had asked the question, this was about 5 years ago, why aren't more people going into the pipeline for these job opportunities? And the big question was answered with the answer that once they screened for drugs, marijuana being the biggest, alcohol actually being low on the list.
That's so interesting.
They weren't being hired.
If we take a look at it, we know that alcohol impairs individuals much, much more so than marijuana does.
More acceptable.
It may be more acceptable
because
socially.
It's the culture of those people who are doing the hiring.
It's the culture of the people who are doing the hiring. I mean, there was a point in time when you could go, if you worked for Miller, before it was Miller Coors, you could go and you could drink beer, during your break or during your lunch hour. Mm-hmm. But I think, the reality of this is we have some serious, serious issues to deal with in this country, and we have some serious health issues to deal with that deal with ways in which people choose to cause impairment to themselves. Whereas, I'm sure somebody's going to think they've seen that movie from the 40s, Reefer Madness, and that's really what happens. But the reality of it is, alcohol in this country, true? I don't think it is. I really don't. I think alcohol is a much, much more serious health threat in this country. The impact that it can have on the economy when people go on binge drinking, as Wisconsinites are known to do,
and not just the economy, families.
I mean, it's just traumatic, and I don't think that we can, in all honesty, say that marijuana is the thing we all need to be worried about when alcohol is such a serious health threat in this country.
All right, let's move on now to topic number 3. The U.S. Postal Service announced another huge financial loss this past week. Imagine if you would a stamp worth $15.9 billion. That's billion with a B, a whopping figure. The estimated $16 billion record loss was more than triple last year's losses. High-tech communication, of course, a big reason for this. But even so, Gerard, these losses are absolutely astounding. Shouldn't the postal system and congressional oversight years ago seen the changes in communications coming and be more on the cutting edge of it and more or less find their niche in this field as opposed to reacting to what's happening?
Most of my immediate family have either worked for the post office or currently work for the post office. So if they were watching this show, they probably wouldn't be very happy with my answer. I think times have changed such that our way of communicating and certainly ways in which we deliver communication has totally changed. And we haven't accepted that with regards to the post office. Mm-hmm. People really don't follow the art of handwritten letters anymore, even typewritten letters for that matter, and sending them through the post. It's a cultural thing that has prompted this change that the government has lagged very far behind in acknowledging, And as a result of that, we're looking at these costs that just continue to build, and we continue basically to ignore. I don't know that we can ignore those kinds of costs anymore and say that we'll continue to pay it just for the sake of paying it. I understand that the bigger part of those costs are involved in our obligations around pensions, but I think that's a cost we're going to have to eat, while at the same time we make the post office more fit for modern communication.
Does the U.S. postal system still have a role?
Well, it does at Christmas time to deliver packages, that's for sure. But boy, I was trying to think, when is the last time I got something through the mail that I needed?
That you wanted.
That I wanted.
Yes, yeah.
Other than delivering packages? I mean, this time of year we get a lot of really neat catalogs, and I actually like looking through them, but that is the whole, seems to be the main function of the Postal Service now. It's a business operation that, you know, promotes some companies through their slick catalogs that are still nice to look at, and, you know, not always, you don't want to go through all the pages online to, you know, sometimes you can find something, but yeah, for some reason, and well, many reasons, the government has not tried to even make any changes in the real role of the post office. We don't really need all those freestanding buildings anymore. If you could put a postal service in some common business like grocery stores or something like that, the times that you do have to mail something, you could line up in the grocery as easy as you could, you know, pick out a building that you don't go to any other time to use it. And it is coming because the communication has changed. You don't even need the post to send money and checks anymore. Things are deposited directly into accounts.
And you know, the postal carriers in America traditionally have just done, I mean, wonderful service.
Oh, absolutely. I've never mailed anything that failed to get where it was going.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you know, I think it is a case where the post office just failed to see what everybody else saw coming in terms of changes in technology and how that meant people were not only going to communicate with each other, but how people pay their bills.
Right.
You know, how you're able to do, you can do virtually everything that you need to do online. And I was just thinking, I have a book of forever stamps that it seems like I've had forever, because I just don't mail things that frequently. I just don't do it anymore. And I think that the post office may have missed its opportunity to remain the size that it is and develop a niche that would really work. I have a friend who has a business. She loves the post office opportunity, the program that they have where, you know, if it fits into a box, it's a flat fee to ship it no matter where you want to ship it. For her, that's something that's really easy. She doesn't have to worry about how much it's going to cost when the FedEx man gets there or the UPS man gets there. She puts it in the box, it fits, it goes. That was a niche that they really could have capitalized on, and they may have missed that opportunity to really do that.
And great commercials on that theme too.
It is. But you know, the problem with this is, of course, there are people, particularly older people, who don't pay their bills online, who like getting a letter and communicate with people, you know, in writing, and you know, they need the post office.
Rick is warming up his pipes for us now, so we have to segue.
That's good. Oh, I can hear him.
Back to politics for a minute. I hope we don't break any glass in the studio. You know, those Republican governors aren't the only ones grappling with President Obama's re-election win. The GOP's own standard bearers seem to be more surprised than anybody. Writing and editing consultant Rick Horowitz thinks that optimism is great, at least until reality suddenly intrudes. Rick?
Don't know how I've been so wrong, fooled myself for oh so long, didn't have a clue, and don't it make my red states blue? Had my eye on my goals, just ignored those other poles. I knew what I knew, and don't it make my red states blue? there'd be no worries, there'd be no shocks. I got my numbers from the guys at Fox. Tell me I'm winning and it's all right. Then right down the tubes on election night. Dumped on gals, insulted gays, blacks and browns and victim ways. My rosy-colored view. Now don't it make my red states thought I was ahead states? Don't it make my red states blue?
Denise, I'm kind of in the mood. Should we segue ourselves out of here?
It's all on you. It's all on you.
So that's a wrap. No pun intended. Have a great weekend. Nice to be with you guys.
Good to have you.
Take care.
Good
Bye-bye.
to have you, Mike.
Happy Thanksgiving.